The air in the small office hummed, cold and still, thick with the scent of stale coffee and fear. My fingers, numb despite the close heat, traced the numbers on the screen. A transfer. Not just a transfer, but a large one. And not just any large transfer, but one labeled with a string of numbers that matched an invoice I knew by heart, an invoice for tuition. Law school tuition. My law school tuition, or what should have been my law school tuition, had I not poured every spare dime, every hard-won profit for my company, back into its survival, into its growth. But this tuition payment wasn't mine. My eyes scanned the recipient name, a name I'd only seen once before, scrawled on a cocktail napkin tucked carelessly into his jacket pocket, a name attached to a woman's face I'd found later on his phone, a face smiling, carefree, oblivious, or perhaps entirely aware of the rot seeping into my life. Her name, and the memo line, stark and damning. Fall semester. University name. The room tilted. The carefully constructed reality of my life, the solid ground I stood on, split wide open, revealing a chasm of betrayal, deep and dark. The hum of the office faded, replaced by a roaring in my ears, a sound like a building collapsing. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Just a few years ago, my world felt different. It felt mine. I built my company from nothing. Late nights fueled by cheap coffee and sheer will, pounding the pavement, making calls, proving every single person who doubted me wrong. It was a small consulting firm, but it was my small consulting firm. Every successful contract felt like a victory. Every invoice paid felt like a breath of fresh air. It was more than a job. It was the physical manifestation of my resilience, my intelligence, my grit. It was security. My husband, Mark, he was Mark. We'd been married 10 years. He worked in finance, something complex and gray that I never fully grasped, but he was charming, easygoing, supportive in his own way. He'd cheer me on from the sidelines, celebrating my wins, offering a shoulder when deals fell through. We had a comfortable life. A nice house, occasional vacations, the quiet rhythm of shared routines. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was my partner. He saw how hard I worked, how much the company meant to me. He saw the late nights, the sacrifices. He saw the numbers. Or I thought he saw the numbers. My company was finally reaching a point of stability, even prosperity. Profits were up. I was finally starting to breathe a little easier, thinking about expansion, maybe even taking a small salary increase myself. For years, I'd reinvested almost everything. My own pay was modest. The company came first. Mark never seemed to mind. He made good money, enough for us. We were a team building a future. The plan was, once the company hit a certain milestone, I would finally fulfill a long-held dream. I'd always wanted to go to law school. Not to practice corporate law or get rich, but to work in a specific area, something related to advocacy, to helping people navigate systems I knew were complex and unfair. It felt like the next logical step, a way to leverage my business acumen and my passion for justice. Mark knew about this dream. We talked about it. He encouraged me. He even helped me research programs, smiling, telling me how proud he was. That smile. I see it now in retrospect, and it feels like a mask. A cruel, expertly crafted mask. The first hint of something wrong wasn't the mistress. Not directly. It was the numbers. The profits were there, on paper, solid and real. But the cash flow felt tight. Tighter than it should have been. I chalked it up to fluctuating client payment cycles, unexpected expenses. Business is like that sometimes. Feast or famine. I didn't worry, not at first. I just tightened my belt, put off the small upgrades I'd planned for the office, delayed hiring the assistant I desperately needed. Just a temporary hiccup, I told myself. Then came the email. It was buried deep in a folder on the shared home computer, a folder Mark rarely used, mislabeled. I stumbled across it by accident, searching for a document of my own. It was a confirmation email. Not from a university, not yet. It was from a private student loan company. In her name. applying for a massive loan, and listed as the guarantor Mark's name and our home address. My blood ran cold. Why would Mark be co-signing a massive student loan for someone I didn't know? The name on the loan application clicked with the name on the cocktail napkin. The name on his phone. It was like dots connecting in the darkest possible way. The Mistress wasn't just a casual fling. This was something deeper? More planned? Or was the loan because he was paying for her and he needed help covering the tracks? That's when I started looking closer at the company accounts. The ones Mark had access to. The ones he'd offer to help manage, to take some of the burden off you, love. I'd been so grateful.
So relieved.
He set up a separate business account for operating expenses, something that seemed reasonable at the time. A way to streamline things, he said. I barely looked at it. I trusted him. The transactions were hidden, buried in layers of transfers, mislabeled, disguised as legitimate business costs. Consultant fee, software license, marketing expense, but when I cross-referenced them, painstakingly, late into the night, the pattern emerged. Regular, substantial payments. Always to the same few accounts. Accounts linked to the university. Accounts linked to her name. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just having an affair. He was funding her entire new life. With my money. With the profits from the company I built. The profits that were meant to fund my future, my dreams, my security. He was dismantling my future to build hers. The confrontation was surreal. I remember holding the printouts, my hands shaking, but my voice was unnervingly calm. Cold. I laid it all out. The email. The bank statements. The name. He denied it at first. Vehemently. His face went white, then red. He shouted. He said I was crazy, imagining things, fabricating evidence. He accused me of being paranoid, of not trusting him. The gaslighting was immediate, suffocating. He tried to twist it, to make me the villain for daring to question him, for looking through his papers, for not appreciating everything he did for the family. But I didn't back down. The proof was too concrete, the numbers too stark. When he finally saw that I wouldn't be swayed by his lies, his blustering deflated into a pathetic, mumbled confession. Yes, he was seeing someone. Yes, he'd helped her out financially. Just a little, he claimed. A small loan. It meant nothing. Just a mistake. He downplayed it, minimized the money, minimized the relationship, minimized the absolute crushing weight of his betrayal. He stood there, the man I'd loved and trusted for a decade, reducing my life's work, my future dreams, to a small mistake. That's when the nausea hit. Not just from the betrayal, but from the scale of the financial damage. The payments weren't small. They were enormous. They'd bled the company dry. The tight cash flow wasn't a hiccup, it was a hemorrhage. He hadn't just stolen money, he'd stolen momentum, opportunity, security. He'd risked everything I'd built. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and panic. My focus was shattered. Every task felt impossible. The company needed my attention, desperately, but I was paralyzed. The image of her face, her name on that tuition bill, the sheer audacity of it, played on repeat in my mind. He had used the very engine of my success, the thing I poured my heart and soul into, to fund her ascent. It was a perversion. I had to keep working, had to keep the company afloat, but it felt like trying to run a marathon with a gaping wound. Clients called, asking questions I couldn't fully answer. Bills piled up. The stress was immense. I felt like I was drowning, pulled down by the weight of his deception. He stayed in the house, a constant, toxic presence. We barely spoke. When we did, it was hollow, strained. He kept trying to justify himself, to minimize his actions. He'd offer to help fix the company finances, the very finances he'd sabotaged. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. He seemed to genuinely believe he could somehow smooth it over, that we could go back to normal. That I would forgive this. The Mistress, I later learned, was completely aware the money was coming from him. She might not have known the specifics of how he was getting it, or that it was company money, my money, but she knew he was married. She accepted tuition payments from him, a married man. She was complicit in the secrecy, in the deception. And she was thriving, posting on social media about her challenging classes, her bright future, the incredible opportunities ahead.
Paid for by me.
It felt like a twisted cosmic joke. I was fighting tooth and nail to keep my head above water, struggling to save the company that was my legacy, while she was sailing smoothly into a promising legal career, buoyed by the very resources stolen from me. The injustice of it burned hotter than the pain of the betrayal. I talked to a lawyer, a family friend who specialized in business law. Laying it all out for her was difficult, humiliating. She listened patiently, her expression grim. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "This is bad," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "The commingling of funds, using company assets for personal, illicit purposes, it jeopardizes the company. It could expose you to legal issues, tax problems. Not to mention the outright theft." The word, theft, hung in the air. It wasn't just infidelity. It was financial devastation. Criminal, maybe. The thought sent a fresh wave of fear through me. Could I lose everything? The company, the house, my financial stability, my reputation? All because of his calculated cruelty and her willing participation. My lawyer explained the options. Divorce, of course. But the financial entanglement was messy. Recovering the stolen funds wouldn't be easy. Litigation could drag on for years, costing a fortune I didn't have. It felt overwhelming, like climbing a sheer cliff face with no gear. The weight of it all became crushing. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, picturing the company failing, picturing myself losing everything. The stress was physical. I lost weight. I couldn't sleep. My hair started to thin. Every interaction with Mark was a fresh wave of nausea. He was a stranger, a betrayer, a saboteur wearing my husband's face. One evening, he actually had the nerve to suggest I slow down with the company. "Maybe it's too much stress for you, love," he said, patronizingly. "Maybe you should consider selling it, or winding it down." The implication hung in the air, now that I've nearly destroyed it anyway. The sheer audacity of his suggestion, knowing why it was struggling, ignited something cold and hard inside me. The flicker of hope I'd held onto, the naive wish that maybe he could be redeemed, that maybe we could salvage something. It died in that moment. All that was left was the cold, hard ground of reality. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for my identity. My work was who I was. It was my worth, independent of him, independent of anyone. Letting him destroy it, letting them profit from its ruin, felt like letting them destroy me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the silence of the house amplifying the chaos in my head. I wasn't just angry or heartbroken anymore. I was cold, focused, determined. I looked at the problem not as a wronged wife, but as a business owner facing a hostile takeover from within. How do you dismantle a threat? How do you protect your assets? How do you turn the attacker's weapon against them? Their weapon was the money that funded her future as a lawyer. The thought sparked something, a new angle, a different kind of fight. What was the most valuable asset they had built together with my stolen funds? Her law degree, her imminent career. What would destroy that? I started researching licensing boards, bar associations, professional ethics. Lawyers are held to a high standard. Honesty, integrity. What constituted grounds for disbarment or denying admission to the bar? Fraud, deception, financial misconduct. Using stolen funds, especially funds obtained through marital deception and potentially business fraud, to pay for law school? That had to violate some ethical rule. It had to. I didn't need to just recover the money. I needed to make sure they couldn't keep the future they'd built on my back. I needed to dismantle their foundation. This became my new focus. The pain was still there, a dull ache, but it was pushed into the background, replaced by a relentless drive. I spent hours online in law libraries, poring over statutes, ethics codes, case law. I learned about the character and fitness committee every bar applicant had to face. Their job was to root out exactly the kind of deception Mark and his mistress had engaged in. My lawyer, bless her, was initially skeptical. Divorce and financial recovery, that was her domain. This felt like a long shot of vengeful fantasy. But I was insistent. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. About making sure they didn't get away with it. She agreed to help me, guiding me through the process, explaining what kind of evidence I would need. Tangible proof of the source of the funds, the deception involved, their awareness of the situation. I continued my forensic audit of the company accounts. Every suspicious transfer, every mislabeled payment, I tracked it down, traced its path. It was like peeling back layers of rot. The deeper I dug, the more elaborate the scheme seemed. He hadn't just transferred lump sums. He'd set up a complex web of smaller payments, routed through different accounts, trying to make it look like legitimate business expenses spread out over time. He was sophisticated in his dishonesty. The scale of the planning, the sheer amount of effort he put into deceiving me, was staggering. It was worse than I'd imagined. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was actively trying to financially ruin me and my company. Meanwhile, Mark seemed to relax, thinking he'd weathered the storm. He was still living in the house, operating under the delusion that things might blow over. He'd talk about needing money for this or that, casually mentioning things that I now knew were related to funding her life. It took every ounce of my self-control not to react, not to let him see the ice-cold plan forming in my mind. I played along, asked vague questions about his finances, pretended to be worried about our money, subtly gathering more information, more confirmation. She passed the bar exam. I saw it online. A triumphant post about years of hard work paying off. The photos of her celebrating, her bright, hopeful smile. A smile paid for by my sweat, my sacrifice, my stolen future. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage, cold and sharp as glass, coursed through me. But beneath the rage was a growing sense of quiet power. She had the degree, she had passed the exam, but she didn't have her license yet. She still had to go through character and fitness. My lawyer and I compiled everything. The bank statements, meticulously annotated, showing the flow of money from my company's operating account through Mark's personal accounts, directly to the university's tuition office and her personal expenses. The emails, confirming enrollment, confirming payments, including the damning ones co-signed by Mark. The evidence of their relationship, confirming she was aware he was married. A timeline of the payments, coinciding precisely with her enrollment periods. We built a case not for divorce court, but for the Bar Association's Ethics Committee. It was a long process. Filing the complaint, submitting the evidence, answering their questions. The Bar Association takes these matters seriously, but they are thorough. There were moments of doubt, moments where I wondered if I was just pursuing a futile act of revenge. But then I would think of the sleepless nights, the financial strain, the feeling of being systematically dismantled, and the resolve would harden again. This wasn't just revenge. It was about preventing her from entering a profession built on trust and integrity, a profession where honesty is paramount, when her entire foundation was built on a lie and stolen money. It was about reclaiming some fundamental sense of justice. The day arrived when the Bar Association scheduled her character and fitness interview. I wasn't there, of course, but I knew it was happening. I pictured her walking in, confident, perhaps a little nervous, ready to present her carefully curated image of a worthy candidate. She had no idea what was coming. She didn't know I knew about the money. She didn't know I had tracked it, documented it, and presented it to the very people who held her future in their hands. My lawyer received the initial notification. The committee had questions. Lots of questions. Specifically, questions about the source of her funding for law school. Questions about financial transparency. Questions about her relationship with a married man who was listed as a co-signer on her loan and appeared to be making significant payments on her behalf. They asked for documentation. Full financial disclosure. She, of course, had to provide it. And when she did, it would confirm everything. Her bank records would show the influx of cash. The loan documents would show Mark's name. My company's bank records, subpoenaed by the bar, would show the outflow of funds. The paper trail was undeniable, more powerful, in this context, than any emotional plea. I imagined her receiving that letter from the bar. The initial confusion, the dawning realization that her financial history was being scrutinized. Her calls to Mark, panicked, demanding to know what was happening. This is where the plot twist, the true turning of the tables, began. They thought they were safe. He thought he was untouchable, that his lies and manipulation had worked, or at least that the consequences would be limited to a messy divorce. She thought her only hurdle was the bar exam itself. They had built their future on the assumption that I was either ignorant, too weak to fight, or that the financial trail was untraceable. They were wrong on all counts. The Bar Association's investigation was thorough. They interviewed her. They interviewed Mark, who, I heard through the legal grapevine, was utterly blindsided and panicked, and they reviewed all the financial documentation. My meticulous work, the late nights poring over spreadsheets, the painful process of documenting my own undoing, paid off. The evidence was damning. The grounds for denying admission were clear: lack of candor and financial misconduct demonstrating a lack of the required character and fitness to practice law. She had accepted significant financial support obtained through deception and potentially fraud, failed to fully disclose it, and continued a relationship built on marital betrayal while preparing to enter a profession demanding the highest ethical standards. The letter came a few weeks later. Not to me directly, but I heard it through official channels, confirmed by my lawyer. The state bar had revoked her application for admission. Permanently. She wouldn't be getting her license. The law degree, the years of study, the past bar exam, all of it was useless. She could never practice law in the state, or likely any other, once this decision was shared. Her dream, built on my stolen reality, was dead. Mark called me screaming. Absolutely. Utterly screaming down the phone line. He wasn't yelling about our marriage or the divorce or even the money he might have to repay, which he would. He was screaming about her ruined career, about how I had destroyed her life. He was incandescent with rage, not for the damage he'd done to me, but for the consequences I had brought down upon them. He called me vindictive, cruel, a monster. He shrieked about how I had gone too far, how I had ruined everything. His sense of entitlement, his sheer lack of understanding of the gravity of his own actions, was breathtaking. He truly believed that his affair and theft were somehow less egregious than my act of self-preservation and pursuit of justice through legitimate channels. He couldn't comprehend that I hadn't just gone for the money. I had gone for the foundation of their stolen future. I hadn't just sought repayment. I had sought accountability within the system they tried to exploit. He was blindsided because he thought he was fighting a divorce case, perhaps some financial recovery. He never imagined I would use the very thing he enabled her legal career as the instrument of their downfall. My response was quiet, controlled. You built her future with money you stole from me, I said, my voice low and steady, cutting through his frantic screams. You risked everything I had to give her a leg up. You used my work, my sacrifice, my dreams to pay for hers. This isn't me destroying her life, Mark. This is the consequence of your choices. And her choices. The bar expects honesty. You two seem to have forgotten what that is. I hung up. The silence that followed felt heavy, final. There was no satisfaction, not the triumphant kind you see in movies. It was colder. A grim, weary sense of equilibrium being restored, but at an immense cost. In the aftermath, the legal processes unfolded. The divorce was messy, but the evidence of his financial misconduct simplified things significantly. The court took a dim view of his actions. I recovered a portion of the stolen funds, enough to stabilize the company, to start to heal the financial wounds he'd inflicted. The house was sold. Our life together was dismantled, piece by piece. Mark faced professional consequences too, though I didn't actively pursue them. His reckless behavior, his panic, his attempts to cover his tracks, spilled over into his work. He lost his job. His reputation was tarnished. He became a pariah within his own professional circles. And her. The aspiring lawyer, her career stillborn before it began. I never saw her again. I heard things, rumors through mutual acquaintances, about her struggle to find work, the difficulty of explaining the bar's decision, the shame. She had her degree, but it was a monument to her unethical choices, a constant reminder of the career she'd forfeited. She paid for law school with stolen money, and the law itself revoked her license for the fraud inherent in that act. The system, slow and imperfect, had ultimately corrected the injustice. It wasn't a happy ending. Not in the traditional sense. The marriage was over, irrevocably shattered. The trust was gone, a fragile thing annihilated by his betrayal. The years of stress, the financial strain, the emotional trauma, they left scars. I had to rebuild my life, my company, piece by painstaking piece. But there was a sense of hard-won peace. I hadn't been a passive victim. I had found my strength in the ruins. I had fought back, not with emotion, but with cold strategy and relentless pursuit of truth. I had used their own actions, their own lies, and the very system they were trying to manipulate to hold them accountable. The company survived. It even thrived eventually. The crisis forced me to be leaner, smarter, more resilient. It was forged in fire, and it came out stronger. The stolen money was a wound, but it wasn't fatal. The most valuable thing I reclaimed wasn't the money. It was my agency, my belief in my own strength, my own capability to navigate even the darkest betrayals. I learned that some wounds don't fully heal, but you can build around them. You can learn to stand tall, even on scarred ground. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.